So we're going to continue on with P5101. And this session can be found starting on page 106 in the task guide. And we're going to be discussing the SUAS Operational Risk Management Form found at the link on the screen. I've also added it to the chat. Again, for those of you who have been downloading all the documents from the website, you should already have this. This is a spreadsheet that is used for our ORM scores. And tonight I'm going to be talking about how we get released for a flight with these scores. So that link will bring you to the forms and worksheets site. And of course, from there, you're going to next click on the CAP SUAS ORM form. And as I said, if you've already downloaded this form, thank you. If you haven't, you should soon. You're going to be needing it to fly at any time. Flight release officers will be asking you for your score. This is an Excel spreadsheet, so you will either need Excel or some other spreadsheet viewer to use it. So let's take a look at it more closely. So when you open the spreadsheet, this is what it looks like. The ORM matrix provides an easy way to consider the primary issues when engaged in aeronautical decision-making. It's broken up into 5 major areas: the identifying area, the team conducting the flight, the airframe being used, the environmental factors at the time of the flight, and finally, the mission details. The bottom portion below that is for the flight release officer approval, and we'll talk about that part later in the presentation. But we're going to take a look at the other areas in more detail. So this is the identifying area, pretty self-explanatory. Where do you find your mission and sortie number?
First.
Right? Wimmers, exactly. So that's where you're going to get your information. So we're going to take a look at the real meat and potatoes of this document in a second. As soon as we put our mission number here, our sortie, our date, who is the pilot in command, CAP ID, initials, and the Air Operations Branch Director, and that would be that would be for your specific wing. Okay. And for that specific mission, really. So the first column is the hazard identification. This is what you are evaluating. The second column is a series of drop-down menus, and we're going to look at more detail at those in a minute. The next column calculates the points that are based on the answers in your drop-down menu. And then we have the risk level column. And again, you don't need to do anything here. It's automatically filled based on the drop-down menu. And the same thing is with the points. So all you have to do is go to the result, click on the little arrow, and make your selection as you go down. And then finally, the yellow total points areas are automatically calculated based on the results. So as scary as this matrix looks, it's the only column we need to worry about is this one. Excuse me. So let's take a look at what each one of the hazard identification headings mean and what options are available to us in the drop-down menus. Here you see we've made some choices, okay? And below is the choice key for every identified potential hazard. So let's go through them. COU. So is there a certificate of waiver or authorization required? Okay. So our options are none, We need a certificate of waiver or authorization for a night or bivalos. And for bivalos, that means beyond line of visual, beyond, it's bivalos, not levelos, beyond visual line of sight. And then if we are flying over people or dropping objects, and if we chose night bivalos, it's going to give us 2 points up here. If we're flying over people, it's going to give us 3 points up there. Okay. Bivalos, we've gone through that. Our pilot, our pick experience, so how many hours of flight time do we have? If we have 50 hours or more, it's a 0. 20 to 50 hours is 1. 20 hours or less is 2. And of course, these are low, moderate, high, and our risk level is automatically going to populate here. What is our team size? So in this case, our team is 3 or more members. So we put that in, gives us 0 points. 2 members, 1 member, no go. We don't get a 0 for that or a 3. We get no go. All right. Whenever we encounter a no go, don't even bother trying to call the FRO. Because if you upload this and it shows a no go, you shouldn't have been flying. So this is why you go through this. And in all cases, when flying an SUAS and CAP, you need at least 2 members. One mission pilot, 1 technician. Or 1 pilot in charge, 1 technician. You cannot just fly an SUAS in CAP 1 member. You will automatically get a no-go. The team, are the members of the team rested? Is it, you're coming in after a good night's sleep? Is it near the end of the day where you might be fatigued? Have you been going for 18 hours straight where you're actually tired? Again, that's where you're going to encounter the no-go. Team experience. Who's qualified? And qualified means qualified, not training. So if you are someone who is in training or who requires practice, then you're not going to be fully qualified. So in all cases, to give you an example, when I am giving the fly-ins for the 5U, when you do your Orm, which you are going to have to do, the team experience is going to at least be 50% qualified, because I'm a qualified mission pilot and technician, and I will be acting as your technician as you fly. But if you are under 50% qualified, which means you have 2 technicians and 1 pilot, and 2 out of the 3 of you are not fully qualified, then you just get a score of 3. And yes, it's going to be a high risk, but again, depending on the purpose for it, that's why we're not giving it a no-go. We're just saying it's a high risk. Depending on the purpose, that's going to be an acceptable risk. Your pick flight currency, according to the regulations, you have to have flown at least 1 hour in the last quarter. If you have that, then you've got low. If you are less than an hour, it's a moderate risk. Less than 1/10 of an hour, which is 6 minutes, that's a high risk. And that you may end up doing that. I did that the other day. I had to give us a high risk because I hadn't flown in the last month because of the weather up here. But that's the whole purpose of the flight, was to give me my 1 hour, to get my 1 hour in. So, so again, that's why we don't make it a no-go. We make it a high risk. And then reflective vests, there's 2 options. You have them or you don't have them. If you have them, you can go. If you don't have them, you can't fly. Any questions about the team area?
I do, sir.
Yes, sir.
When we're talking about pilot and control flight, hour currency you just mentioned, are we talking about within CAP or even like outside? Like if I have my own personal drone flying, what are we talking about currency there?
We are talking about actual flights at least 1 hour in the last 3 months.
Okay,
And
so
it
even with
doesn't
my
matter
personal
how
drone
you've
is
done
fine.
it. Yeah.
Okay.
And as long as it's in your logbook, that's all that matters. Now, as I said, in my case, because of the weather we've been having up here in Sault Ste. Marie, I haven't been able to fly since December. Right? The last time I flew was down when I was saying earlier before we started, I was down in Sterling Heights and I flew at Thanksgiving weekend. Hadn't been able to fly since. So, you know,
Right.
I'm just coming outside of my quarter. So when I'm flying on the 26th, my last flight was on the 25th of November, I'm outside my quarter. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to the machine area. All right, so there are 3 identifiers here. First, you will identify the type and complexity of the UAS to be flown. So we have simple. That would be the Skydio X2, Phantom 4, Phantom 3, Mavics, the Parrot. I can't remember the name of the Parrot, but anything pretty much off the shelf is going to be a simple GPS. Okay, if you are flying an SUAS in ATTI mode, which means you've taken off the GPS and you are flying it in attitude mode, then you are now in a moderate risk because you've taken off the GPS. You are in high risk if you are flying a complex. So the Beast, which is the Skydio X2D, is a complex machine, and you need a special what's the word I'm looking for here, Christy? It's not a waiver. Like
endorsement.
You have to fly. You actually have to have a 5U and a 91U for a complex bird as well.
Certification.
Certification. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. So if you are flying a simple off the shelf, it's a 1. If you're going to fly it outside without using the GPS, and I've done that, it's fun to do. It doesn't hover, it floats. And so you have to make sure that you are in control. And when you're doing it, I did it just for fun. I was in a wide open park, nobody around, and I was 20 feet off the ground just to see what it would do. And man, when a wind picks up and you're in attitude mode, it just takes you if you want. So that's why it's a moderate risk. And then the complex machines, like for example, the H530 is definitely going to be a complex machine. The Skydio X2D. Okay. Maintenance issues. No known problems. Is it due for maintenance? What are the requirements of the manufacturer? If CAP doesn't have a set maintenance schedule, you go with the maintenance schedule of the manufacturer. And yes, Lieutenant Kursky.
I just want to point out that Skydio says that their propellers can get changed at a later date than what Michigan Wing says, or National says they're supposed to be changed at. So logging your time as well as the time on your propellers is vitally important, because at 50 hours, those propellers are supposed to be replaced.
Exactly.
I'll get off my mechanic soapbox now.
Nope, that's exactly. Why do you think I had you here tonight? Because I knew this is where you were going to inject, so it was perfect. I want to talk a little bit too, going back about the SUAS types. Here's an ironic thing: the Tello is a training drone, but a Tello is actually going to be a moderate risk drone because it does not have GPS. It only flies in attitude mode. It has sensors, but it is not GPS capable. Okay. So then we have communications. Are your communications, what do you have? Are you going to be using your mobile and a cell phone? Do you have just the VHF or a cell phone? Do you have nothing at all? If you've got nothing at all, notice what it's telling you. No go. If in doing your maintenance check, you do your pre-flight and it cannot pass your pre-flight, it's a no-go. Any questions about that?
Can I add one little injection there?
Yep.
As eager as you are to fly, especially if you've got weather coming in, don't skip the pre-flights or the post-flight inspections, because if it's damaged when you get it and you fly it, and then during your post-flight inspection, you notice there's damage to it, or the next person notices there's damage to it in their pre-flight, you are going to get blamed for it. We took possession of an X2D that came from, I don't know where it came from, that had a 1/4-inch crack in the propeller that they flew for 2 hours beyond when they recorded the crack. And it came to us after going through somebody else, I won't mention their name, and they didn't inspect it before it came to us. But before we flew it, we noticed that there was a crack in that propeller, so that we notified the previous possessor of it, so that we didn't get the blame for that expensive propeller replacement.
Exactly. And that's, you do a pre-flight and a post-flight. And we're, again, one of the things we're going to go through are the checklists and what we do. And before every flight, you do a pre-flight. Every time you box it and take it out, you do a pre-flight. Every time you fly it, you do a post-flight before putting it back in the box. You're always checking to make sure that everything is correct. Okay.
That
So
sounds
next we have, yep, sorry.
right. This is Sergeant Hinton again. It sounded a lot like my military experience. Any kind of piece of equipment, you go over it, whether it's something that moves or even a weapon. You look at it, and if it's damaged or there's something on there, I'm not signing for it. Because they're signing it over to you, to the next guy. If I see something wrong with it, I'm not signing for it. So that way they can blame the other guy. Then at the same time, when I get through with it, and it's time to turn it in, I go over it again, make sure there's no damage to it. It sounds like the same principle, whether it's something you launch in the air or whether it's something you're using or something you're driving. You check it before the guy signs it over to you, and you check it before you sign it over to the next guy.
Exactly. And that's excellent. Thank you. So now we're going to look at the environment area. This includes the temperature, the visibility, whether or not there is precipitation, the KP index. We're going to talk about that. And the terrain over which you are flying. You will assess the level of risk by selecting the criteria for each environmental element. So let's take a look at each one of them. So again, temperature, pretty clear. We have between 45 and 80, that's low risk. Under 45, over 80. Why do we worry about the over 80?
Batteries.
I'm sorry?
Batteries.
Yep. Exactly. We need to make sure that we're not going to overheat in the air either, right? So if we're under 20 degrees or over 95, then we're a high risk. So for example, on the weekend when we were flying the mission, we were under 45 because it was only 31 out there. Okay, visibility over 3 statute miles, 0. No points. Awesome. Less than 3 statute miles. Remember, we're not allowed to fly less than 3 statute miles unless we have that COA. If we've got it, it's a moderate risk. If it's less than a mile, it's no go, period. So we can't fly if it's less than a mile. If it's less than 3, we need to have that authorization with us. If we don't have it, we better be able to see over 3. Precipitation, none, which is obviously the best for any drone. Rain or fog, 2, or heavy rain, sleet, or snow. So even a light snow is going to put you at 3. Now, I always laugh at this fog because, again, if you got fog, then obviously you are not getting a 3 statute mile visibility. So, but if you've got a light rain coming in, you might still be able to fly depending on which SUAS you have. The KP index. Okay. The KP index relates to electromagnetic interference. Higher indexes pose higher risk for the communications and control links necessary to safe UAS navigation. We've got an entire session on that coming up in a couple of weeks. So for now, just know what your score is based on the numbers. So if the KP index is 1 to 3, it's 1 point, 3 to 6, 2 points, 7 or more, no go. Because if your KP index is greater than 7, you probably will have very little, if no, control between your actual handheld and the remote and the SUAS once you get more than 10 or 15 feet away from you. Then we're looking at the terrain. Low or flat or low hills, large hills and small mountains, or large mountains and cliffs. Okay, so we've had situations where we fly from one area, but we're actually taking off over a cliff. And if that's the scenario, then it's going to be a 3. Why? Because from the takeoff point to where you could go up 5 feet, but then as soon as you go over the cliff, now you may be looking at a 200-foot drop. And Lieutenant Kershke knows that very, very well. Well, for those who want to hear the story, stay after. We'll talk about it after. We're not right now.
No, but I do want to point out though, you could go 5 feet up, go over that cliff, and be over the 400 feet above ground level.
Correct. And that's why it becomes a 3. Any questions on environmental factors?
Yeah, one question. I'm surprised that wind is not considered.
We've talked about that. It's one of our biggest bones of contention as well. The nice thing is that we use our experience right now, and when we have apps that we use to determine whether it's safe to fly, as well as the Orm, and we know obviously how fast our SUAS can go. So for example, a Phantom 3 has a maximum speed of 21 miles per hour. Therefore, if your winds are 22 miles per hour, what's actually happened to that bird, regardless of what you're doing?
Going down.
It's going backwards. If your wind's coming from the north and you're headed north and the wind's coming at you at 22 and it can only do 21, it's going to do, you're doing this, but it's actually going to do this. Right? So again, it's not one of the things that we drop down, as to what the wind speed is, but I am pushing it, and I have talked to the other region DOUs, and we want it added into that ORM for sure. So excellent question.
Looking at this chart here, so I guess if it's kind of cold, you can have good visibility and you're on a flat ground, you can still fly in the snow?
That is correct.
Okay.
Again, you wouldn't want to be putting it up in a blizzard, but if you've got a light snow, and again, you know.
I just wasn't sure whether drones can fly in snow. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Drones are electronic equipment, and so are the wonderful controls that we have. And we all know that electronics hate water, right? So snow, you know, when it's colder, our batteries aren't working that well either. We're going to talk about that in another one. So we've got, if you've got snow, you've got cold. If you've got rain, you've got moisture. Moisture and electronics never have been a good fit. So yes, technically you can fly, but as the pilot in charge, you have the right to say, I'm not putting it up. And we did exactly that on the mission on the weekend. It started to snow, and as soon as we saw the snow starting to come at 400 feet in the air before it went and fell, we brought it in as fast as we could. Yes, Lieutenant, go ahead.
Colonel Bomer pointed out, the Wing DOU pointed out, that the X2D is considered water resistant according to the manufacturers. But he wanted, when we asked about it, he pointed out that it's absolutely water resistant. They take a hose at the manufacturer and they spray it down and it keeps working. But he pointed out in that snow and in that rain that you're getting out of the clouds is all the dirt and grime that it collects up in the evaporation process to get up there. And in his training with Skydeal, they burned up the motors on an X2D because of that dirt and stuff settling down into those motors. So if you're willing to make that phone call to your DOU because you crashed the drone, more power to you.
There you go. Any other questions in regards to the environmental factors? All right. So finally, let's take a look at our mission factors. So complexity. Is this your first time flying this particular model of SUAS? Is it a complex like the Skydeal X2D? Or is it a regular DJI Phantom 4? Are you qualified to fly it, or are you in training? We're getting new radio models soon. Are you trained on them? These are all questions you must ask about yourself and your team, then complete the matrix. So again, the complexity of the mission. Is it a simple task? No new technology? Is it a complex task with no new technology? Are we doing a complex task with new technology? Are we just doing a simple mapping, or are we going in under high wind conditions, trying to get close-up pictures of damage on a bridge? Okay. Are there other SUAS teams in the area? Why do we want to score that?
If you're flying in the same area, there might be some
Yes.
confusion.
Exactly. We don't want to interfere with other lower level flights, right? Exactly. Aircraft. Are there any manned aircraft in the area? We're not talking about jets flying at 10,000 feet above us. We're talking about low-level flights. Again, why would we score this?
Sir, like like a hypothetical situation, if you're launching from near a hospital, not far away, and it's got a helipad,
Yeah,
you need to know that.
exactly.
Or
I'm going to give you one that's not a hypothetical. It's an actual. When I took my 5U, I took it out of Florida. And when I did that, I was actually in class Gulf airspace, but according to everything, I was in class Gulf airspace, but the darn traffic that was coming was absolutely crazy because we were right on where they come in for landing at Fort Myers. So I was doing flights of 5 minutes and then coming down because there'd be a plane close by. 5 minutes coming down, watching another plane go over top. So you have to make sure that you know that. Are there aircraft in your area? Are you close now? Again, up here in this part of the UP, we have aerodromes. I've got 8 aerodromes within a stone's throw of me. Within less than a 10-minute drive, I'm encountering 8 aerodromes for seaplanes. The otters and beavers that are landing and taking off from the St. Mary's River. So if there's none in the area, we're good. If there are we coordinating with them? If we are, then it's moderate risk. If you're like me out down in Florida, where I have no way to coordinate with 18 different flight patterns and different jet services, because I had Delta, I had JetBlue, I had all American, I had all sorts of them on top of me there. Right? I wasn't going to be able to coordinate with them. To be safe, I gave myself a 3. Travel estimate to the site. Did we travel 50 miles or less, 51 to 100 miles, or over 100 miles to the site? Again, why do you think that we're scoring that?
Just fatigue, just been tired from traveling.
Fatigue, exactly. And don't forget, we're not talking about just accidents with the SUAS. The further you travel, the greater the potential for a car accident. So for example, when I do my ORM and I'm traveling, when I'm traveling to Iowa, if I'm planning on putting anything in the air that day, I literally have to score myself as a 3 because I will have been traveling over 100 miles. Now the next day, I can drop down to the 1 because I'll only be traveling maybe 5-10 miles from the hotel or from the bivouac or from wherever I'm staying to where we're flying. But again, I go back to the weekend when we were on the exercise, I drove from Sault Ste. Marie down to Cadillac. I was an automatic 3 on the ORM. Colonel Bomer himself was less than 50 miles, but I was more than 100. So because as a member of the team I was there, we scored as a team, we scored it as a 3. Okay. And then of course our traffic. So, none. Are we in a rural area? Are we traveling the I-75? Are we traveling the I-75 through, small towns, Gainesville, Bay City?
Now,
Flint,
on that
really?
traveling, on that of the day of, are we talking about the day of the actual
Correct.
mission?
Whenever we put a norm, we're putting it the day of the mission. How far did we travel?
Okay, Sam, what I'm saying is, what I'm trying to get across is, if we're in that same day and do a mission that same day, that determines what you're going to put in there.
Correct.
All right.
So when I do when I do the SARX, if I plan, I'm going down on Thursday. If I plan to put my bird in the air on Thursday, then I'm going to have to do myself as a 3 because I'll have traveled over 100 miles. However, the next day when I'm flying. So it's not the day of the mission, it's the day of the sortie, right? So what day are you doing this sortie? And so when I'm going to be, if I'm going to be flying the next day, then it's going to be how far did I travel that day? Was I, up here in Sault Ste. Marie, everything's a rural room. When you're in a population of 7,800, everything's rural. Now, if I'm traveling in Flint or in Saginaw or, in the Detroit area, I'm probably going to look at moderate for city traffic. And then of course, if I'm in, I don't know what the traffic's like in Detroit. So I know what it can be like in Chicago at 5 o'clock. If I'm in rush hour.
Same thing in Detroit, 5 o'clock. You got the rush hour or going on too.
Like here we have rush minute. Don't travel the road between 2:59 and 3:01, because that's when the factories have switched over from the 7 to 3 shift and the 3 to 11 shift. Everybody's on the road, and 3 minutes later, it's all good. You never knew what happened. So, Okay. Any questions about this?
Is there any guidance on with an aircraft? Say, for example, let's say all the aircraft are, say, 1,500 feet AGL. Can you then ignore them? I mean, is there a point at which you say the aircraft are not relevant to the UAS?
No, and that's a good question. If we're talking from a cap perspective, and we're going to have SUASs and our manned aircraft in the air, then we're going to be probably scoring ourselves as a 2 with aircraft in the area with coordination. And again, just because we're supposed to fly lower than 400 feet doesn't necessarily mean that some factors that are maybe out of our control, we might be flying higher. Okay. So once you've selected the level of risk in each category, the score is tabulated in the matrix automatically. So in this case, our total score is 16. I'm going to give you a hint. Remember that number. So our score in this case, 16. When we flew on the weekend, our score was 21. It's going to change. Every flight you do is going to change based on the factors that you're playing in. So you take a look at the 3 ranges. The score for the low risk is 14 to 27. Moderate risk is 28 to 37, and high risk is 38 to 49. That determines which level of authority you require for a flight release. So if it is less than 27, a regular flight release officer is okay to go. I can brief you, Lieutenant Kershke can brief you, the other Lieutenant Kershke. There are 6 of us right now that are trained to be FROs for SUAS pilots. If you go to 28 to 37, then you require air branch approval from IC, or you need a senior flight release officer. And right now there are only 2 senior flight release officers in the wing, and that's myself and Colonel Bomer. If your numbers are 38 to 49, then you either need the wing commander or Colonel Bomer, or ironically enough, myself as the region DOU. So your wing DOU, your wing director of operation, or your wing commander, or the incident commander must give you approval. Okay. And of course, as soon as you see an NG, no go, it's full stop until you can correct it. Don't even bother continuing, regardless of what your score is at that time. Everyone understand that? I'm going to assume that's a yes from people. You just were all muted when you said it.
Yes, yes.
All right. Now, remember when I said things change and that these are draft documents? Here's a perfect example. You no longer require officer signature on them. Okay, wings have SUAS trained flight release officers, and they have a documented form that they use when they send out a flight release, and they upload that flight release to your sortie now, so that you don't be needing to chase people. And again, it makes sense. Right now, if you're down in Detroit and you have to call Lieutenant Kershke or myself for a flight release, we're not expecting you to come all this way for a signature, and I sure as heck ain't going down there. We will do the documentation. We'll upload the flight release into Wimmers for you. Okay. So based on your score, you'll either call an FRO, a senior FRO, the wing DOU, or, as I said, you may have to go to the wing commander. You may need the director of operations if you can't get a hold of Colonel Bomer. If you're part of an actual mission, you may need IC approval. Okay, so I'm going to put your mind at ease here on one thing. I've seen at least 100 of these, and the highest score I've ever encountered was a 23. Okay, so although it's possible, is extremely rare that you'll ever be above 28, let alone 37. The ORM process provides a constant way for the Civil Air Patrol, UAS pilots and air crews to assess risk and maintain safety consciousness. So with this in mind, SUAS flight releases are accomplished by sortie, not individual UAS flights. A sortie is typically related to a duty day and may contain multiple flights by multiple pilots and teams. And we'll be discussing how that gets logged in another session. Okay, so as part of the fly-in day, or as part of your 5U, everyone is going to have to complete one of these, because you're going to have to put that in to Wimmers. The irony is your 5U literally can become your first mission. Okay. And you are going to need to get a flight release to participate and get those and get that off. Any questions? All right, let's take 5 for the quiz, and I've posted the link in the chat, and there it is for the people who are watching the video. And so at this point, I will let you have at it, and then we'll move on to the next session.